Hi, my name is Rodrigo Martinez and I'm with IDEO here in Boston. And I'm really fascinated of what happens at the crossroads of design and biology at all different scales. Every time there's a new, powerful, new and promising field that develops, I think it's important to put it in perspective. So let me take one approach to create a perspective for synthetic biology and then maybe derive 2 or 3 questions that I think are really relevant. And maybe I want to use something that might help us understand context in a historical sense around imagining needing and wanting. And from this, I will move on to design and build. So, as a species, as long as we can remember, of course, we've been imagining different things, and this has very much been linked to what we need and want. And then, over time, we've created different ways of addressing some of those needs and wants, many different ways, but one of them is obviously designing and building different things. So let me just share with you some thoughts on how I think we can create a context for synthetic biology. So if we go back, you can imagine that for a long time, humans over time developed a way to solve certain needs with some raw materials originally, and let me do here, raw. And we can go all the way back to things we did in stone, rocks, 60,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. And then eventually we do, obviously the agricultural revolution around 10,000 years ago creates a shift that happens here. But you can also see that from raw materials that we used originally to address some of those wants and needs, we created some very simple tools. And from that, we created simple objects. And then more complex tools. And then complex objects. Now, fast forward that to the Industrial Revolution, so we're sort of 1850s to 1870s, and then we have a series of different raw materials, and now we're moving to simple tools, and you can imagine that here we can even think of using, obviously, steam, for example, to create power, and we have gears, etc., and with that, we create simple objects, and with that, we create some complex tools, and with that, we create some complex objects, and you can see where this is going. Now, not only does what happens between these different stages speed up as we move from one area to another, or from one, if you want to call it, scientific or technical revolution to another, but the applications of these for these become much more complex, and the applications of these for these become much more complex. And then, of course, you can say, well, fast forward to the, just to generalize, 1950s, and now we're going to the digital revolution. So if this is basically ones and zeros, right? And this we said was the Industrial Revolution, and this was before. And now, where we are today is we're starting to create with raw materials, with simple tools, so very simple objects in the biological space. So you can imagine now we start to have tools that we can use to cut particular segments of genetic material. And we start to develop some complex tools that can help us, for example, obviously sequence any type of organism in a matter of hours, in a matter of, we're going to a matter of hours. And these not only become more powerful, but of course they become cheaper, but they also become more widely distributed. So from the digital revolution, we now have digital 3D printers that you or I or anyone can basically have for a couple of $100, you can build the parts, you can get the parts to build your own. So what does that look like for synthetic biology and the biology space, if you like, or the biology revolution? So one interesting question that I think emerges is, where are we in this trajectory? And I think for some things we are building simple objects. We're starting to create artistic representations. We're starting to build some particular enzymes to have certain metabolic functions for energy transformation, for density of mass, for example, for textiles. We're starting to create some very powerful tools and complex tools, not just at large scale like sequencers and analyzers, but also at the nano level, and how do we start using those tools. So there's an element of scale here that is very relevant. So we're somewhere here. So one of the questions that I think is fascinating is, there was no way that 50 years ago we knew how much impact on our society, on our economy, on our political structures, on our creativity, on our ability to be creative was going to come from the digital revolution. Today, the ability to use APIs and code, we can do it wherever we are. We have a whole structure of platforms and complex tools to be very creative in this space. What does that look like in the bio side? At what point would we have the equivalent tools, APIs, software programs, languages, ability to basically create and code in life wherever we are? We're starting to have some of those software programs available. We have some of those tools available. We're starting to have those building blocks available. There's different types of companies and organizations creating those. So that is sort of the third question. So the first question is, where are we? Two, what does this scale mean both for products and services that start to emerge here? So here we start to have products and services that you or I can make, buy, build, design. Three, what are some of the unintended consequences that could allow for creative opportunities, just like it happened in the digital revolution, that it's difficult for us to imagine today, and how can we start enabling those to happen? And then I think a question that is relevant for a student, for example, that is interested in this field is, where do I want to be? Do I want to be creating some of the core science that enables this to happen? It's a fascinating field. At the molecular level, at the genetic level, at the systemic level, at the organismic level, how do I want to advance this field to enable this to happen? Or do I want to be creating the tools and taking some of the basic science and creating some of the tools either at small scale, at the genetic scale, or even molecular scale? Or do I want to be creating some of the tools that are at the larger scale? For example, what are some of the first in vivo printers that are going to be available for any of us to be able to print living organisms for a particular function? For example, to clean something in your house, or a fabric that changes density depending on the ambient temperature. Or do I want to be in the role of bridging what happens here to what happens here, which is also partly where design comes in. And that's part of why I'm so excited about bringing in into the discussion design and building, because part of the role of designers is to translate what happens in this phase to what happens and create opportunities, what happens here. So let me stop there with those 4 questions.